So, hi, good evening, everyone. This is my official greeting. I actually think everybody in the room knows this, but I will do it anyway for good protocol. I'm Gordon Rankin. I am the New Hampshire Conference Minister. I am a member at First Parish in Dover, and I greet you all tonight to our second connecting session related to our 2024 annual meeting. Tonight, our focus will be on conversation about the work that's been happening with our association capacity task force. And I will turn things over to them in just a couple of minutes. But before I do, a couple pieces of protocol, etiquette perhaps, for our connecting session gathering. The first of which is our group can get on the larger side as we have these meetings. So if you would be so kind as to, when you are not speaking or asking a question or such, to please mute yourself. That'll help us from getting distracted by background noise. We'd be very much appreciated of that. We would want you to remind you, as you just heard a couple moments ago, that we record all of our connecting sessions. In your registration, you've already given us permission to record you in this case. But I do want to remind you of the fact that we're doing that. And while we want you to be able to ask what you want to ask, we want to remind you that there's certain things that maybe you don't want to say in a recording that'll be available publicly. This probably is not the setting to share your Netflix password or anything like that. So just be thoughtful as we go on that front. I think you should be able to say or ask anything you want to do with association capacity. That'll all be plenty good. So. And finally, I will let you know that this is a annual meeting related event. So our standing rules for annual meeting apply here, which means we ask that when you speak or ask a question, and it only has to be the first time you speak, please do introduce yourself by name and church affiliation. We'd very much appreciate that. And with that said, I am going to be quiet for a while at least, and turn things over to our presenters for this evening, which are two of the members of our association capacity task force who have been hard at work for 2 years. I turn you over to 3 years. Well, they can declare how many years it is as they speak.
Oh, there's 3 members.
3 of us.
Yes, but only 2 of you are officially presenters.
Oh.
The third has already declared that she's not a presenter tonight.
Who's not presenting?
Marcy.
Oh, that was slick, Marcy.
I know, right?
But she does have a question for you all, so get ready. Anyhow, I will turn you over to Shana Appel and Deborah Roof from our Association Capacity Task Force.
Hi, folks. I'm Shana Appel. I'm a retired UCC minister and moderator of the Hillsborough Association. I attend the Congregational Church of Amherst. Deb, you want to introduce yourself?
Deborah Roof, and I'm in East Derry. I'm senior pastor and teacher at the First Parish Congregational Church.
So thanks everyone for being here tonight. Obviously, we want to hear from you what your thoughts, questions are. We can give you a brief overview. Do folks need a brief overview of what's happening with the Association Capacity Task Force? If so, just give us a hand. Excellent. Then you all kind of have an idea of what's going on, and let's just turn it over to questions or thoughts that you might have. Somebody's not on mute, and I'm getting background.
Yeah, trying to figure out who that is, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm going to pass a question to you guys that was presented to me by a member of the North Country Association. We have not yet met.
Right.
Vote on things, but I think we need to, bear it in mind as a question, which was, there's still some hesitation for some folks about having the board be the top level of administration for the association where there's no separation, as opposed to, I don't know, having an association board that is more or less the representatives that would be meeting regularly anyway from the different working teams, with maybe a couple of at-large people thrown in, so that there was still some separation between the board and the for the state conference and the association. It seemed a good question. I wasn't quite sure how to address it because I couldn't say that there was a
Mhm.
separation between the board and the association in that way. So there you go. That's a question that was posed to me, and I'm on the board and, had been listening in with the task force, but I promised I would bring that question to you, back to us.
Oh,
it-
great. Thank
Good.
you. Thank
Gail,
you.
can I clarify, when you say you're on the board, you're on the New Hampshire Board of Directors?
Yes.
Okay,
So when the person came to me, I tried to listen with my board hat on,
sure.
but also the task force hat on. And I felt reasonably confident that while we're clearly moving to this model, that it's also a model that might have some open-endedness in terms of if we have to restructure any, like if the board comes back and says, hey, this is too much for us, that maybe is there an iterative period where it's being explored as a structure and it can still be modified slightly as a structure at the statewide level. I wasn't sure, so I'm bringing that question to all of us.
Yeah, it's a great question and one that's come up in a couple of different ways, shapes and forms.
Okay.
So one of the things that the Association Capacity Task Force has tried not to do is get too down into the weeds of how the 4 committees on ministry and the 1 committee for covenant and connection will organize themselves. But it is our expectation that there will be a leadership team made up of chairs of those various committees. So that would, function to keep each other in the loop about the work that's happening.
Right.
I think if I can jump in, from what I understand, when the task force received the go-ahead to, oh, Gordon is sharing something, yay. When we received the go-ahead to study this, we studied different models, and one model is what we decided to run with, which is the conference acting as an association. The other model did not achieve what we'd hoped for. It was a model of making an association separate from the conference and recreating the problem that we have of not enough representation across all parts of the conference. And so we didn't continue with that model because it looked right away on paper like it wasn't going to work. This one offers the options. The 5 committees are individual circles that have particular functions in and of themselves. And just like in my own church, if the facilities board makes a decision to do something, the council very rarely will turn around and say, yeah, we haven't studied as much as you have, but we don't think you should do that. You're right. Each one of these committees has particular functions. They study, they look at their agendas, and they make decisions and then communicate those decisions to the board of directors. So it's not board of directors telling the committees what to do. It's the committees reporting to the board as I see it. And then the last piece for me, Gail, is we're congregational. If we don't like this, if this thing doesn't work in a few years,
Right,
we modify and evolve.
right. Well, that's kind of what I assumed was probably available as sort of a
Yeah.
confidence booster for the people that are worried about us exploring the new model. I just didn't want to promise that that was a possibility unless, you know, we were confirming that. And I guess the way the question was framed, part of the question was, so each team, you know, let's say they have an actionable item, that there's a person with there's going to be a change in somebody's ministry standing. And the team has done all the work and they're coming with a recommendation. Can they implement it, or it must still come to the board and the board basically votes a yes, we're going to take the recommendation without, and then it's actionable, or, you know, is the board ratifying things that the teams are doing or not?
Well, so the way that I understand it, first of all, let's go back to what Shayna just said.
Yeah.
The task force is not going to micromanage
Right.
how that actually will happen.
Yep.
And my understanding is that they're decision makers.
Mhm.
Each body is decision makers, and they're communicating their decisions to the board of directors,
Mhm.
not waiting upon any kind of blessing or approval.
So they're authorized at the
They're
association
authorized, yeah.
level to take action.
That's how we're
Just
presenting it,
for the
yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Well, I think that addresses some of the concern that people had that somehow the state could override the association's decisions.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah,
this is the nuance that I was,
sure.
you know, came to me, and I was
Yeah.
wanting to parse that with you all. Thank you.
I would encourage you all to look at our frequently asked questions because significant parts of this are spelled out in that. The board's role is executive function and resourcing these committees. So it's making sure these committees have the tools they need to do their work. The board will not be making decisions around authorization.
There you go.
Those decisions are made by the committees on ministry, essentially as happens in all our associations right now.
Right.
The board's kind of taking on the executive committee role. Executive committees, except in the case of fitness review appeals, have no say in those authorization matters. That's all handled by the committees on church and ministry. Our committees on ministry will have the same authority that our association committees on church and ministry do now.
And Gail, did you happen to see when Gordon, can you reshare that document?
The bubbles.
The bubbles,
I mean, I looked at the bubbles.
tiny bubbles. So as you can see, to the left of the board of directors, big bubble, there's the council,
Right.
which is the part that we're envisioning communication between those various committees on ministry and the committee on connection and covenant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. I don't know if you all know, but we have had 2 associations thus far meet and vote affirmatively to move into the new structure. So Merrimack and Rockingham are on board. And we've got some more meetings coming up. Hillsborough is scheduled now for November 10th at 3 o'clock. It'll be a Zoom only, and we'll be just addressing this topic and vote, and we feel very confident that Hillsborough Association is on board. So we already have a Granite State Association. Now
Association.
it's just a matter of how many more people will.
Yeah.
Mark,
Mark,
Just to let you know that Southwest Association is also meeting, I believe, I think it's November 3rd,
Yeah.
at the United Church of Jaffrey, and so we also clearly have this on the agenda.
great.
One of the clarifications that I'd like to make is in one of the listening sessions, and I will not apologize for loving Star Trek, and someone said this is like the Borg, and resistance is futile. And man, I've lost sleep over that. We this is not that. Any association who does not choose to join the Granite State Association is free to vote not to join the Granite State Association. It's not a done deal until all the votes are in.
Resistance is futile is not congregational polity.
Exactly. Exactly.
Tanya,
And I want to honor the feeling. Many of us are pastors, and we need to be pastoral about what does that say about the feeling of the individual about this change. This is a big change. And that can be scary.
Tanya, did you have a question?
Well, I have a question from a member of my congregation
Great.
who wondered, and this could be in the frequently asked questions, actually, but they wondered about, they're one of the delegates to our association meeting, and wondered about the attendance at ministry, discernment, what is the word I'm looking for?
Ecclesiastical councils?
Ecclesiastical councils, thank you. Are they going to have to drive all the way up to Littleton if there's somebody who's having an ecclesiastical council if we're all one association?
Such a great question. So that was an issue that we gave a whole lot of thought to. And where we came down was a percentage of churches that make up the whole. Obviously, we won't know what the whole is until the votes are all in. But to the best of my recollection, it was 6%, 7% of the congregations represented in the association. So that will, in all likelihood, I mean, if everybody came in, it would still be like representation from 10 local churches. So no, people won't have to drive all the way across the state, but they're certainly more than welcome to do so and be a part of that.
And Shayna, share, you're the moderator of your association currently, and your meeting, when it happens, is going to happen how?
Via Zoom.
So nobody's driving nowhere. Our meetings are more and more going to be Zoom or hybrid.
Right, right.
Yeah, depending on the technologies available to the churches, sure.
Does that help, Tanya?
Sure, I mean, it helps as an answer. Although I will say, just personally speaking, I think there's something really important about being in person, because of the way that the Spirit is discerned and felt very differently than when we have this this electronic technology intervening. I mean, it's a wonderful gift, but it also can, you just can't, it's harder to discern, I think.
And impossible to lay on hands.
Well, yeah. But I'm curious how you came up with the 7%. What was your metric?
we studied the other models of
Okay,
associations who have gone in this direction, and we looked at their numbers and then looked at our numbers, and we came up with 7.
And also figuring out sort of, based on all the bylaws that we were reading of various associations, discerning what is the current number of churches that they pull together and what percentage would get us there. So
Okay.
to keep it as close to where it is now.
Do you know, for example, Tanya, do you know what it is currently in your own association? What's
I don't.
quorum?
Linda might be able to help me answer that.
Oh,
or
just-
Shayna.
So in Rockingham, there's 22 churches, and we only need 5 pastors to be present and 8 churches present. So that, just to give you an example, it's about 7 in my current association.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 7 and 10 in Hillsborough.
Yeah,
I was gonna say 9.
9.
okay.
Yeah.
There was another question that hasn't come up here tonight, but it came up, somebody else was asking me about so what will be the role of delegates, congregational delegates, right? Because we still need delegates. And what we're envisioning is one annual meeting a year, which would be divided, half to deal with conference business and half to deal with association business, which in a way is kind of cool, because it means like the delegates are really going to have a really good idea of what is going on and going on statewide. So I like to refer to it as, when you're out there recruiting your delegates, tell them they just got a massive promotion. Like, instead of, just doing the work of their small geographic association, they're now like responsible for how things work at the state level. It's one of the many ways I think streamlining the overall structure is going to make it more nimble. And we discovered during COVID how necessary that is. Transparent, accessible, while also allowing us to pull from the diversity that we have conference-wide for these various committees on ministry and the Committee on Covenant and Connection.
Gail's raised her hand.
Yes, Gail.
Yeah, I apologize for not being on camera, but I'm trying to, I have very limited bandwidth at this point, and turning on the camera just makes it makes the signal go south. But in any event, first of all, this is a really positive thing in my frame of reference. And in addition to, nimble and transparent and things like that, I also hope it will make the whole notion of association more vibrant. Because quite frankly, and I've experienced this in several places, the obligation of having the 2 meetings a year, it almost felt like a struggle. And it didn't feel exciting. And so if we can get beyond that, the obligatory aspect of, the individual associations having to have these, several meetings a year, into something that it just feels more dynamic and moving forward, I think would be a really healthy thing. So I have a couple of questions, and maybe this is all in the frequently asked questions or in the report that I admit that I confess that I haven't looked at yet. But I'm interested in what kind of sort of pushback or sort of concerns we've already heard from Gail about, one, but are there major things that have people that have pushed back on as a result of this? And also, what are the next steps in terms of making this an actuality? And part of this I ask from, so I'm from now Grafton Sullivan Orange, which is a 2-state association, which is kind of a unique creature. And there was some pushback, or not even wanting to deal with this question from some of the folks in that particular association because of its unique makeup. And so if this goes forward, are there a certain number of associations that have to vote in order for this to go forward? And then does it go ahead even if other associations haven't even decided or endorsed it yet? And when is this all taking place? So that's several questions, kind of like any concerns and then the logistics. And sorry if I should know this already.
No, it's all good. That's what we're here for. There are 7 associations and there will be 7 votes. And of the 7 votes, the number of associations who vote to join the Granite State Association, that association will exist starting April 1st. Associations who vote not to join the Granite State will remain who they are. So that answers your second question. Your first question is, in your area, there's a sense of grief that the Vermont churches will not belong to the Granite State Association. And there's a history in Grafton Orange Sullivan of being the only association in the denomination, from what I understand, that is over state borders. And they're very proud of how unique. Oh, that's not true, Gordon? I thought that's what they told me.
Only one over conference borders.
Over conference border. Okay.
There are other associations that cross
Yes.
state borders because the conference
Yes.
is multi-state.
Yes, over conference borders. So they're very proud of that uniqueness that they're going to lose that if they vote to join the Granite State Association, because what will happen is that 60-40, 60% of the churches are in the boundaries of the state of New Hampshire and would come into the Granite State Association. And the 40%, those Vermont churches would be invited to join the associations in Vermont. So that's Deborah's version. Okay, Shana, Gordon, come on in.
So I think one of the things I heard up in Grafton Orange Sullivan was a fear about losing their connection to churches in Vermont, and we've just simply tried to reassure them that not only is there no reason for them not to maintain, that's a lot of negatives. There's no reason for them to abandon those relationships. In fact, we're hoping that once we dismantle these geographic boundaries for associations, that many more churches will work with their Vermont neighbors and their Maine neighbors and, their Massachusetts neighbors. That, one of the challenges sometimes within associations is that you can have a church or churches within the association that don't have that much in common. We have a number of congregations right now throughout the New Hampshire Conference who are functioning without ministers. Wouldn't it be nice if all of those congregations, regardless of the former association boundaries, could get together and have an affinity group so they could meet, once every couple of months and talk about, so how are you guys doing this and how are you working out that, so we think it'll in fact contribute to more connectivity, not less. And there's nothing about this move to an association, to a single statewide association, that mandates you no longer speak to people on the other side of the river. So that hasn't been a part of it, but I think that fear was part of it. I think one fear that I expected was going to come up, and thankfully it hasn't come up a lot, a little bit, is anytime you're consolidating something. We've already heard, Gail raised the question about concerns about, wait a minute, is all the power getting consolidated, into one place? In some respects, yes. And in other respects, no. Because while we're moving to one statewide association, it really means there's going to be a great deal more transparency. I mean, right now, different associations have different requirements for MIDs, for ministers, around boundary training, for example.
Right.
And if you move from one association to another, it's a boatload of paperwork for me. All that goes away and we get to a singular unified model of how we're working. And so I think in that statewide configuration, there's actually going to be more transparency, because you can't have a rogue association like, hey, I'm the moderator of the Hillsborough Association, and that's a pretty heady position. And maybe I decide, along with the chair of my committee on ministry, that, we want to do something very different, involving our mids or involving something, and could we run off in our own little private Idaho and do that? Yeah, we, because polity is congregational, we absolutely could. I'm just trying to think of, Gordon, do you have any other concerns that have come up that we haven't?
Yeah, I mean, I would just, well, probably concern wise, and then I just want to speak a moment to the Vermont churches. I know one of the concerns that was raised last year at the Grafton Orange Sullivan meeting, I was heartened by a couple weeks ago at our association meeting, which was the pieces, will people in Concord and Portsmouth care about us out here? And some questioning of that. What intrigued me and heartened me at the Merrimack Association meeting is that out of 6, maybe 7 questions that were asked about this during their vote, 2 of them had to do with what would happen with Grafton Orange Sullivan. And I'm like, gee, it's nice to see that they are actually showing their care for what happens there. And so I hope that gets communicated in, because I thought that was very affirming. And I do want to say a word about the 10 Vermont churches of Grafton Orange Sullivan. And I am hoping I'm getting this right, because I was trying to look up where I got the name from. So they will be joining an association in the Vermont Conference that I believe will be called the Wyndham Orange Association.
Oh.
So that is all worked out. They get co-billing in the association. So our friends in Vermont are looking out for them as well.
One of the things that excites me about the new model when you look at the bubbles is that 5th committee on covenant and connection. I would nominate myself for that committee, because that is going to be so much fun to look at ways that we can connect Walpole with Jackson and Lyme with I don't know, Derry. Just there's no borders anymore. It's affinity groups. Shana used that term. That's going to be a really exciting committee.
Maybe we could make a quilt exhibit. Who knows?
There you go.
There you
For
go.
example, Mark.
So if I can, this is Gail Kinney again. If I can sort of respond to that notion of affinity, and also the we are not now prohibited from communicating across the Connecticut River. In some ways, it feels that once people get used to this, or get used to the notion, and even get used to the notion of affinity groups that aren't bound by association boundaries, in some ways, if we're freed of sort of the bureaucratic obligations of maintaining a local association with busy people and not enough volunteers, then maybe we have more energy to, in the case of Grafton Sullivan Orange, reach across the river about things that matter, about programs and activities and joint endeavors. And the other thing is that if so it's the committee, it's the one of those 5 bubbles that's responsible for really pushing this affinity connection.
Yes.
I think that's critical. I do supply in a church. I'm involved in a Grafton Sullivan church as the worker justice minister, but I provide supply for Merrimack County church that does not have a pastor. And they don't seem to be going in a pastoral direction. And if they had connections with even 3 or 4 other churches that were likewise situated, no matter where they are, it would be
Right.
so helpful and it would be so inspirational. So that's exciting, but I think people need to think about it more, or to really be
Yes.
encouraged to think about that. So now I'll shut up.
No, that's okay, Gail. Thank you. Yeah, the new model has 5 committees. 4 of them are committees on ministry, each one with a designated function that is currently done 7 times by committees on church and ministry. So there you've got the 4 COMs and then the committee on connection and covenant and connection.
I know one of the things that I was really excited about, with that 5th committee is, my God, when I think about what's happening in our country today and the ways in which white Christian nationalism is just tearing at the fabric of this nation,
Amen.
I think, my God, never has there been a more necessary time for progressive religious voices to be out there in the public square. And long before I ever stepped foot on the Hillsborough Association, I sort of looked at the delegates and as the people who worked at the association, and I'm like, oh man, those are the guys that got it all going on. They understand how this whole thing works and how it comes together. And instead of maximizing their potential, we've got them bogged down in administrative work of associations. And I'm sitting here in Hillsborough and I got Southwest off to my left and I've got Rockingham off to my right, and or Merrimack, and everybody's repeating this, we're
Right.
So you've really got, like, historically, we've had the best and the brightest boggled down in all this administrative work. And one of my hopes is that in this new structure, we'll see more congregations who are interested in public ministry and getting that progressive voice out into the public square, able to come together and work more effectively across these former association boundaries. So that's, it's one of my hopes. I'm excited about it. And I have to say, today, the Association Capacity Task Force had a meeting this morning, and we were talking about how to solemnize, how to ritualize the dissolution of a structure that's been in place. Gordon, how long has this structure been in place? Do you have any idea? Since the founding of the New Hampshire Conference?
Oh, before the New Hampshire Conference was the New Hampshire Conference, because that only goes back to the beginning of the UCC, and most of our associations go back well over 100 years. And
Yeah,
there was a moment in this morning's meeting where that hit me.
yeah.
And, I've been like so engaged in the jots and tittles of all this that it was, I think, the first time I sat back and really took to heart what it meant that we were dissolving this association, this multi-associational structure, and realizing that, yeah, that we've got to find some ways to do that. Once we get through the Hillsborough Association vote, obviously the Hillsborough Association will continue to exist until March, and we'll be meeting and looking for a way to come together in the spring and to both celebrate that and to also to mourn the loss of something that was put into place and that's served us well for the bulk of that time. It's not serving us real well right now, but it did, and it did well for a long time. Created the associations have been the architecture of our interdependence. And so letting all of that go is not something that we do lightly.
I appreciate the idea of, because I've been talking to people about the fact that our upcoming North Country Association meeting it's historic in that it may be one of our last ones, right? And that we're voting to become something different. And so I've been encouraging people to come. I was like, even if you've never been to one before, this is an important one to go to,
Yeah.
to participate in the life of the Congregational Church.
Right.
And I also want to just say again, like my own church went through our organizational restructuring, and the thing that calmed people down about a new idea was if it wasn't like so hard and fast that it couldn't be changed. We said we're suspending what we were and we're trying this out, and then we'll confirm it in a few years, and it's up for tweaking and changing. And if that language is there in the presentation in any way, it tends to soften people's resistance to change, as opposed to change that this is like, one and done. We're not going to change once we pass
Let
this.
let me reassure you that as Gordon had sent me a message, the bylaws for the Granite State Association will be written in the first 18 months
Right.
of the association. So you want to talk about, it's fluid. We have a basic structure, a form, basically, that we're going to step into and then flesh out, but that is going to be determined by the people who step up to serve on these committees, on these various committees.
Yeah.
So
And
there's definitely, it's not a rock solid.
No, and I'm just saying, like, making sure people hear that piece, or, like at my association meeting, I'll highlight that for the people that are worried about consolidation, like whatever their fears are. Even on the call that I took, the person relaxed when they heard that it wasn't set in stone. It's a work in progress. That was very reassuring to people that are worried about transition. So I think it's good that we have that flexibility. That's all.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us. Are there any other questions, concerns, thoughts, offerings? I know you guys are sitting here, you're getting so excited. You're just trying to figure out which committees you're going to serve on, right?
I'd just like to say thank you to the people, to this task force. I think you've done an amazing job, and you've worked a long time. How many years have you been working at this? It's been a long time.
2.5.
Yeah. So just thank you. I think it's great. And I really appreciate the effort that the real commitment you've had to go the mile and get it done. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to say it has been 2 words you don't normally hear together, functional and committee. But this has been probably the most highly functioning task team I have ever participated in. And Marcy Miller, who's sitting down here being really quiet, has been an outstanding project manager, really keeping us on task and keeping us moving. And then, of course, none of this would have been possible without the support of our conference staff, who have just been amazing.
Yes.
So it's really been an honor and a privilege to serve.
Thank you.
I have a quick question that was raised to me the other day.
That you don't already know the answer to?
I don't know the answer to it.
Somebody note the date and the time.
And I know we talked about it in our committee, but it has to do with, in the resolution, we talked about level 1 and level 2 churches, status 1, status 2, something. And I could not answer the question.
Schedule 1, schedule 2?
Yeah, thank you, yes. So Gordon?
What is I missed the question part of the question.
What is a schedule 1 versus a schedule 2 church? I couldn't answer that question.
I would have to go back and actually look it up specifically myself. I never remember the distinction between 1 and 2. Both of them are essentially the same type of situation where, because the New Hampshire Conference, and this would be true for our associations as well, are bodies that predate the United Church of Christ itself. And because we come from the congregational strain of the 5 groups that came together to form the United Church of Christ, our congregational churches each got to vote individually whether they would join the United Church of Christ. Some of these churches, however, already had relationships with the predecessor body that would become the New Hampshire Conference, or in the talking associations, have standing in an association of what would become the New Hampshire Conference. Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 churches collectively are churches that never voted to join the United Church of Christ, but have always been in covenant with what has become the New Hampshire Conference. The distinction between them, I don't remember off the top of my head. I can go back and try to remember what that is, but that's way in the weeds.
I think the question just had to do with what are they and how does that impact the voting? And so they just weren't sure what it was.
Yeah, so that's what they are. We have 3 churches that are Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. I can think what 2 of them are off the top of my head. I can't think of exactly what the 3rd one is. And it doesn't impact because it doesn't impact what's happening here, because this is about their standing in the association, not their connection with the United Church of Christ. So they would be a part of, if their associations vote to become part of a Granite Estate Association, they would become part of the Granite State Association, just like every other church that's in that association.
A minutia question, but one that came up the other day. So
that is a good
historical distinction. Yeah, a historical distinction, but not one that will impact their vote or participation.
Right. Did you want to bring up the resolution and just talk through those 4 pieces of the resolution, if that is of some value to folks? Because this is the actual resolution that folks will be voting on.
And the resolution is identical for 6 of the 7 associations. It is modified somewhat for Grafton Orange Sullivan because, again, they have congregations within the Vermont Conference. But all 6 of the 7 associations are voting on this and this alone without changes or amendments or anything, because we got to vote on one thing. Otherwise, we've got no real way to go forward. There are, Marcy, what are there, 3 actions? First action, enabling action, which is basically allowing the committees on ministry to handle all of the responsibilities for acting as association, assets, that's money, ministerial standing, and all the stuff that happens with MIDS, et cetera, and then the agreement to dissolve the association. So that's basically, but you'll vote, but each association will take one vote on all of that. So that kind of covers everything that the committees on ministry will be yielding to the statewide association.
So once each association votes for this, will they meet again after that anyway, or will this be their last meeting?
That would be up to the associations. I know in Hillsborough, we've still got MIDS who are involved in the system, and so we'll be meeting a few more times. Certainly the executive committee will meet a few more times, and then again, as I said, I'm hoping that the Hillsborough Association will come together for a spring meeting, a sort of a final meeting that will be both a celebration and a letting go, or moving on. But that's up to each association.
And that is what the Rockingham Association decided to do as well, is that since we will dissolve as of the last day of March, that we will have some sort of spring meeting, because we have the spring meeting and the fall meeting. So we will meet once again to solemnitize, to say thank you to Rockingham. Thank you for our history. Thank you for all the ways that we were and we walked together, and blessings upon us as we move forward. Every association will make that decision whether or not to do that. Larry just joined us, so I'll throw him under the bus. He said that, he told us at the meeting today that they're gonna do a service after the vote. Larry, the question was, will associations meet after the vote? And the simple answer is each association decides. And so I was just sharing what you shared with us this morning.
Yeah, sorry I was late. I had another meeting, but we decided to do something, assuming the vote is positive, after the vote, that both lifts up and honors where we've been and lifts up any losses, but also celebrates where we're going. And it's felt to us, because we didn't think we'd come together before April 1st, to do it actually at the meeting.
So friends, I need to start working on drawing us to a close. If there's one last burning question, we might be able to tackle that. I am not seeing that, however. Please jump up and down if you have it, just so I'm sure. I see no jumping, so. Oh, Brenda, did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question or not, because I'm not sure what I'm then thinking of financially. Does each association have a different amount that is sent in per member to
For
the
their fellowship
association?
dues?
Yeah, for the dues. Are they all the same, or are we all fluctuating out there and doing our own thing as associations? Will it change?
So yes, there are differences between the association's part of what is collected for fellowship dues. I believe it ranges, I think the one that collects the least, in addition to the $15 that supports the conference's support for associations. But I believe there's an additional 50% is the least amount, and I think it's up to $1.25 in at least one association. So it's not a great range, but it does different range from association to association.
I'm a treasurer, and I just think about dumb things sometimes.
Yeah, what that'll be in the new association will be a question that the board will decide when the new association is formed in April. I don't anticipate it changing
much
greater than what the largest association, or what the association that charges the most does. We just wouldn't shift that drastically at this point. Could you be in one that does 50 cents and we might go with 75? That's possible, but it won't be a super significant shift at this point.
Well, I didn't think it would, but I was just saying, we might be going in different directions here, and I said, I didn't know how much it varied.
No, this is part of the fun of our association system, is we all do it a little differently.
Yes, we do.
That's good information to have, though, that it's $1.50 based on what you just said. It ranges in that range.
Yeah, I think it has like a 75-cent range per member.
Yeah.
Unless an association has made a recent change that I'm not aware of. But
Well, I think ours is $1, but I'm not positive. I think it's what I remember, but. So, thank you.
okay, thank you for that question. So friends, I want to remind you that we have a few more of these connecting sessions coming up next week on Tuesday. We will have conversation around the resolution that'll be coming for action at the annual meeting, a resolution proposed by our Peace with Justice advocates on gun violence prevention. So please feel free to join us for that conversation.
That's next Tuesday, Gordon?
That is next Tuesday, the 22nd. On Thursday, the 24th, we will be introducing one of our newest ministry initiatives to you, which is our Ministry 21 program. Ministry 21 will also happen to be the recipient of our offering at the annual meeting this year. And then on Sunday, October 27th at 4 and Thursday, October 29th at 7, we will have our traditional kind of ending conversations with the conference ministers where that's totally free range. You can inquire with Sarah or myself about anything you want. And we might even have answers for some of it. So please feel free to join us for any of those. Of course, the annual meeting itself is on Saturday, October 26th, in person at Geneva Point in Moultonborough, also virtually on Zoom. At this point, registration is closed. We can't take folks either way. However, as always, our annual meeting also gets broadcast on YouTube and then recorded there for later. So if there's any portion of it that any of you or church members want to go back and see, that all remains available. I won't say forever, but for a good while. Stuff. And just to get you ready, if you're coming in person to that annual meeting, I want, this is my in thing to let people know right now. We will be utilizing 3 spaces at Geneva Point. Our main meeting space is one that will be heated. Our other 2 spaces are unheated spaces where our exhibitors and check-in will be is unheated. And the building where likely many of us will eat lunch is unheated. I would just encourage you to bring some layers because we don't know exactly what the temperature will be that afternoon. And we want to make sure that people are comfortable when they are eating lunch or visiting our exhibitors. So please think a few layers as you plan to come to annual meeting. And unless anybody has an annual meeting related question, we will call it an end for our evening.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Go out and howl at the moon.
Thank you, Shana and Deborah, for presenting.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Tanya.
You too. Bye.
Bye now.